chaos. I never saw anything like this in my life.
Seriously damaging the building's reactors.
The Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan said today the disaster is the worst crisis for Japan since World War II.
Memories and clothes.
We don't want to leave. We're going to cry. The world is facing many problems. Who do you think is going to solve it? Do you believe Congress is going to solve it? Neither do I. Who then? Civil society? They have a very important role, but which organization is going to step up and lead the world?
Health is the only thing you can't give as a gift. I could give you illness, I could get you sick, but I can't give you health. I could give you wellness, I could give you wellness tips.
Yeah, so one of the big challenges that we're facing right now is that the pace of change is going more rapidly than we have been accustomed to and what we evolved for. And so we're experiencing a lot of confusion, a lot of disorientation, and of course with some of the harms that we're seeing in the world with natural disasters and ecological problems, there's also a considerable amount of trauma and of grief.
If we continue business as usual, by 2017 we will have locked in 6 degrees warming of the climate. At that point, industrial agriculture goes away. You simply cannot do agriculture in a world that's that warm. So what I'm talking about is quite urgent, and it also is an enormous opportunity.
I think if you look at all the different entities that are driving environmental sustainability, the transformation we're going through, NGOs, government, the academic community, business really is at the center of all this because business created these problems. Business also is the only entity that has the resources to drive kind of change, to pay for the kinds of investments, to create the kind of innovation and get it to scale that we all need to solve problems like climate change and everything else.
So what is global wellness, year 2020? And with this growth and this speed of technology changing and revolutionizing our world, how do we take responsibility and accountability on an individual level on how we pay and play a role in what 2020 looks like?
The world as we now stand faces incredible peril, whether it be the incredible inequality, the number of people that are hungry every night, the wars that go on, the climate, life on the planet is in peril. This is what the scientists tell us. Global Biodiversity Outlook 3. We're losing every major ecosystem on the planet. The oceans are acidifying. We will lose coral reefs on planet Earth, perhaps as early as 2050. The Amazon, the glaciers are melting. When your grandchild asks you, what were you doing? Did you know? Did you know we were at risk? I think the only institution left on the planet big enough, resourceful enough, well enough managed to take on the problems facing us is business. And you cannot do business on a dead planet. So businesses are increasingly recognizing that they need to step up.
Sustainability is a word they don't really understand, but here's what they do understand. They understand that the world is changing and getting more volatile. They understand unfairness, and they understand the need for justice, and they understand that the earth is being really, it's reaching its limits. And they know that their generation is going to pay the bill. So my kids, when I come home, they're asking me, Mummy, what did you do for the planet today? And so I involve them in my conversations and I ask for their opinion because these kids, our kids, are going to be the kids that make the change happen.
And that intrigued me. I'm like, wow, they're switching up how they do business. I want to know why 2020? So I started doing research on, how populated the planet would be by year 2020, how it puts constraints on food supplies and water supplies, how, what does global health look like? more importantly, what does global wellness look like?
So one of the things that we have to think about if we want to change culture is we have to think about what shapes our perception of the deepest aspects of culture in each of our societies. One of those things is how we experience space, another is how we experience time. And so just to give you an example, we have calendar systems, and there was this recent invention, the weekend. So there was a time when there was no such thing as a weekend, and it actually was necessitated by wage-based labor and people that worked within a corporate workforce. So the creation of the 40-hour work week led at the same time to the birth of the weekend. So that's an example of how, as we experience our perception of time, we also have social constructions of time. And those social constructions become really powerful because they become real to us, and they shape how we make decisions and how we produce things and how we interact with other people. And one of the things that I think we need to really consider deeply is which of those organizing tools of our culture for space and time are going to be most useful for helping to bring us into community in a period where we have the most rapid change in history. And basically we're going to be living through a time of tremendous turbulence and uncertainty. And what we map out ecosystems of ideas and behaviors to figure out how to help them spread better. And this includes the underlying psychological drivers and the history of the ideas and behaviors that came before. So in a way you could think of this as being like how biological systems evolve and how they change in time. Cultural systems do the same thing, is to apply the principles of cultural evolution to accelerate the transformation of our civilization and all of the cultures of the world to achieve a state of global thriving.
I'm a journalist by training, so I've for decades have been at the intersection of business, technology, and society, and I think that particularly interested in the power of business to transform society for better or for worse. And I think in the sustainability arena, there's a huge opportunity for business to create positive change simply through what they do every day, which is making, innovating, marketing products, but doing it in a way with radical efficiency and tremendous innovation. We're seeing that across the board now, and that's what's exciting to me. As powerful as business is in affecting change, it's only one part of this. We need to engage consumers. We need to get the policy piece in place. We need to price carbon. We need to price energy fairly. We need to price the materials. Water is not priced at all what it costs. And so there's a lot of pieces of this, and I think that what's taking place at conferences like Fortune and conferences all over the world where businesses are coming together and saying, we can't do this alone. We need to be in partnership with other businesses, other big businesses with entrepreneurs and innovators and disruptors, but also with the public sector, particularly cities, since national governments aren't really leading this. And when they come together with those new ecosystems, there's a lot that can happen.
There were guidelines to live by, and now there is no, right? For the majority of people on the planet, in the major cities, there are no guidelines. And those major cities are consuming all the stuff on the planet because there's no guidelines. And everybody's obese and has diabetes. That concept is spreading all over the world. So a lot of major cities are going to have what we are learning here in the States. If we don't start, putting some type of guidelines in consumption, in practice, and manufacturing, distribution, waste, creating waste, not wasting what one would call waste, and reuse it, and mind the things that we promote, market, consume. I think what's going to happen is because we live in this transparent, connected world, new guidelines are going to come into play. We should all be concerned. We should all play a part and be a part of the conversation.
The best business leaders are stepping forward and recognizing it is in our interest as a business leader to start behaving more sustainably, to engage our customers in a conversation about how do we deliver the goods and services that you desire in ways that don't harm the earth, that don't harm people. So companies like Unilever, insignificant little startup, and I encourage every CEO around the planet to do the same thing, to look at what it is that gives real business value to your company.
Over 200 million Americans every year go to our national park, national forests, and grasslands. And the challenge that we face today is these areas are seriously degraded. There are approximately 80 million acres of national forest land that are suffering either from catastrophic fire or invasive species or lack of maintenance and care.
Just like it was a long haul to get to where we are now. And if you go back, you realize that this was designed. The idea of buying something, it breaks, you throw it away, you buy the same product again. That's not forever. That started in 1940, after World War II. It's called planned obsolescence. And it took a while for that to be adopted. As a matter of fact, there's a generation of people that when things switched to be made that way to break, that gave birth to what we call vintage stores, antique stores. Vintage is just something that's old. Antiques is a process of how things were made to last. And antiques are from 1940 and down, because something happened in how they manufactured things from 1940 and up. So, and it was a long haul for us to get to this state where, and this state of mind where we purchase a product and they make it to break, and it goes in landfills.
A great example is shampoo. Back at the early 1900s, late 1800s, women literally washed their hair once a month, and we used a brush and created natural oils through our hair every night, 100 strokes, and then once a month would wash our hair. By the 50s, we were up to once a week, and today, of course, it's a daily thing. Not once, but twice, which of course has created a need for this thing called conditioner. That shift from once a month to every day was created by brands, frankly, by their desire to sell more shampoo, and they did a compelling job of telling a story that caused us to change our behaviors. So brands have a rich history of behavior change, and sustainability is no different. Why should they want to change behaviors? Well, because a quarter of the population is what we call brand huggers. They're not tree huggers, they're brand huggers. They are the most brand loyal. They will pay more for brands they trust, and they shop most often of any other consumer. And by the way, they happen to want to hear a sustainability story from brands. They want to connect with brands that feel like an outward expression of their internal environmental values. They care about the planet. They care about doing the right thing. They care about society, and they want to buy from brands who share their values. So we shouldn't think of these guys as tree huggers or as the green consumer. We should think of them as the most desirable consumer, because they in fact are. So that's the role for brands with sustainability, is go tap into that most desirable consumer and show her the pathway forward to sustainability. The number one challenge that brands are facing from getting sustainability to really take hold is believability. For the niche green brands, no problem with believability, but the niche green brands alone are not going to move this forward. When it comes to mainstream regular consumer brands, the mainstream regular consumer will not pay more for green versions of those brands. The consumer who will pay more does not find those mainstream brands to be authentic. So those mainstream brands have to put a stake in the ground and tell an authentic social or environmental story to give that most desirable consumer something to connect with. And until that happens, we're going to stay pretty stuck.
Companies face a few big challenges in making these changes. The first is understanding that it's possible, understanding that sustainability represents the biggest business opportunity of the 21st century. There are several challenges here. One is just understanding the scale of the opportunity. We believe that sustainability is literally the biggest business opportunity of the 20th century. And yet most companies still think of sustainability as a cost, as something to do as much of as we can afford. It's an old way of thinking that doesn't recognize the substantial contribution that sustainability can make to innovation and business value. A second really critical challenge is that none of us can get the prices right. We're all facing distorted prices in the marketplace that don't represent the real cost of things. Resources are undervalued, they're subsidized, and so it's hard for companies and individuals to make intelligent decisions unless we get the prices right. Those are two of the things that are very much on my mind these days.
The biggest challenge is how all the parts fit together. It's really easy to look at any particular part of global problems and really see that it's the key. It's easy to look at media and say that media is what controls the collective zeitgeist, and that if you can change media to have more enlightened messages in it, then you get to change the consciousness of the people, which change their behaviors. It, you know, precipitates a change of everything. So it's easy to see that as key, or it's easy to see that the key is economics, because if you change the value equation that incents all behavior, you inherently change the values and the way that resources are allocated. Or that the key is education, because if you're raising children with more enlightened understanding, comprehensive values from the beginning, then in one generation so much can shift. And the truth is that those are all parts of the key. So the key, as I see it, is really wholeness, is governance, is how do we address all of those parts in a optimized fashion individually and all of them together, and how do we allocate all of our global resources to all the things that need done in a way that doesn't just focus on maximizing the benefit to that individual area, but maximizing systemic evolutionary benefit.
And so when we have calendar systems that presume linear forward progression of time, as we have here in the Western world, then that linear progression is going to make it very difficult for us to make sense of non-linear things, like rapid disruptions. So as an example of this, to make it really concrete, in early 2008, a lot of people saw themselves on a linear sequence through their lives. I went to school, I got good grades, I got a degree, I got a job, bought a house, had a family, I'm looking forward to retirement. See, there's a linear sequence through the lifespan. But then their mortgage collapsed, their jobs went away, the global financial system just collapsed around them, and all of a sudden that linear sequence that organized all of their major decisions evaporated into thin air because it wasn't real. It was only real because people agreed it was real and because our economy could support it. So imagine the amount of angst, confusion, uncertainty, trauma, fear that came out of the loss of this linear sequence for constructing meaning around the lifespan. In the next 30 to 50 years, we're going to have disruptions on that scale and larger on a regular basis. So we have to learn how to manage our perception of time so that we can protect ourselves from the harm of anxiety when our constructions of time break down, and also so that we can understand the changes that are happening, because sometimes the changes are happening on multiple scales of time and space at the same time. Some things that are happening on minute-to-minute scales, other things on month-to-month scales, other things are on decade-to-decade or century-to-century scales, and they're all important. And so what I would encourage as just one example of moving beyond linear time is to start thinking about fractal time. For those of you who don't know, fractals are a kind of geometry where when you zoom in or zoom out, they look the same at different sizes. Something this big looks the same as something that's this big, and so on. And the reason that I encourage that is if we start to look at what's happening moment to moment and how it's related to what's happening on decade to decade, when we see things that are the same, that they look the same at the different time scales, that means that what we do minute to minute will impact what's happening on decade to decade, because our way of thinking lets us work across both time scales at the same time. But we can only do that if we break out of linear sequences of time. So that's just one example of a useful way to think about time when there's dramatic change happening on multiple scales at once.
If you look at human health, you look at 3 of the top 10 mortality drivers, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all of those have a significant correlation with the consumption of meat or animal protein. If you look at environmental issues, the raising of livestock for animal protein or meat contributes anywhere from 20 to 51%, depending on which study you're looking at. So it's a very significant contributor to major public policy issues that we face, not only in the United States, but internationally.
So if you look at the population growth and how much food we had to produce to feed the population, there's been a tremendous growth in the last 150 years. And so that's why we have now factory farming, and there's only 1% of the population who are farmer, and 100 years ago was 90% of people who were farmer. So the shift has changed tremendously. In order to feed the population, we cannot continue doing what we're doing right now. Because the cost of traditional protein for the environment is enormous.
I have 2 children, and both of my children were suffering from severe asthma. So what I did is I tried to eliminate everything that I could possibly eliminate, from their food to other factors, anything that was directly impacting their health. And then I realized that it was actually environmental conditions that were affecting it.
What's in this cleaning product? Are there materials in it, chemicals in it that are harmful to me, my kids, the water? What are the biggest pollutants, the biggest impacts? I'll tell you there's kind of two big frames, right? One, there's the pollutants inside our bodies. There are all sorts of chemicals that are in our bodies that didn't exist 40, 50 years ago. And they got there because of the products we're using. So we want to identify the safer products to avoid the kind of harsh human health impacts. But then there's also, what about the impacts to the broader environment? That cleaning product, that laundry, that shampoo, any of those things might affect both. So we're really kind of finding ways to identify both and identify the better products.
The biggest challenges in the remodeling and construction industry is we consume a lot of resources, causes a lot of waste, releases harmful chemicals and toxins into the environment.
Basically, we operate under the premise that the world as we know it, in order for things to stay the same, they're going to have to change fast. The greatest challenge business leaders have, in my opinion, is that by the time you're running a large corporation or a large company, you've been groomed to think a certain way, behave a certain way, and act consistent with a set, to drive a set of results, a very narrow set of results and a very narrow set of levers. And so it's very difficult to see new things that are affecting your business. And so the greatest challenge they have is, I think, to see the world in time as it's changing all around us, and then to really have the will and the courage to act consistent in service of their shareholders, but also in service of their stakeholders in the world.
What is your legacy? What do you want to be remembered for?
We're more in tune to when you're going to get a phone call than we are when there's going to be an earthquake. And now in there.
Companies that are leading in environment, social, good governance policy have 25% higher stock value than their less sustainable competitors. Little companies that are getting into this business have an incredible opportunity to become the billionaires of tomorrow. Again, supplying what it is that people need in ways that are truly sustainable.
I think over the long term we're learning that the only way to be profitable is to be sustainable, and the only way to be sustainable is to be profitable. We're still early in that journey overall, where people do see short-term differences between a resource extraction or resource use decision that might deplete something or might overuse something or use something inefficiently, and they'd make more profit. But I think as time goes on, we're seeing those things really converge, where you really realize, and certainly long-term thinking corporations, they're still somewhat slaves to the quarterly reporting cycle in the public markets. But there is, in the background, for corporations, a sense of protection the long-term interests of the company.
I think that one of the big challenges that we face in this movement to transform our civilization is to fully embrace psychology and the human mind, to really appreciate what the human condition is in the midst of this transformation, so that we can recognize things like grief and like trauma, and also on the other side, happiness, joy, exhilaration, so that we're able to navigate what is the most turbulent period in all of human history, and do so in a way that is both graceful and respectful to the basic dignity of the human condition. If I had to describe what we're going through right now and where I see us going, I would tell it briefly as the story of humanity in three chapters. Chapter 1 was the first 99% of our history, where we lived as small hunter-gatherer societies. That lasted for roughly 200,000 years. We had very small communal cooperative societies, roughly on the order of 30 to 50 people. Then there's chapter 2, which was the invention of agriculture and the rise of empire. The thing about empire is that empire requires perpetual expansion and conquest, and that has lasted from about 10,000 years ago to the 20th century. The reason that it ended is because you can't have continual growth and conquest when you reach a planetary scale. So now we're entering the third chapter. The third chapter is a time of restoring our relationship to each other in tribal communities, but having a global tribe. You could basically think of this as Gene Roddenberry's future, like we achieved the Star Trek Federation. Basically, we come together into a global tribal community where we are in relationship with the Earth on a planetary scale, recognizing that we're part of the planet, but at the same time having gained this tremendous wealth of technology and science and understanding of ourselves.
These companies have now been around for decades, if not centuries, some of them, and the people that run them do feel some responsibility to pass off a viable long-term entity. And so in that sense, a lot of big companies have actually been at the forefront of thinking about this convergence of long-term profit and long-term sustainability, and taking the most actions towards that direction so far.
Communities have the opportunity to develop a higher quality of life by doing more for themselves, by using all resources efficiently, by innovating. And the notion that the world stands on the edge of catastrophe is true, but it need not go that way, because we have all the technologies that we need to solve all of these problems, and to do so at a profit.
If I was speaking here to the senior executives of the biggest companies in the world, I would ask them a few questions. Number one, what business are you really in? What really is the value that you're delivering to your customers? Or to put another way, what is it that your customers really want from you? It may not be the thing that you sell them. It may be the benefit that that thing brings them in their life, the value that that brings to them. And ask that way when you think about what's the value you're delivering to your customer. A range of new possibilities open of how to organize your business, of what to make and what to sell and how to deliver it. And that drives a shift from a world of making more and more things to a world of delivering better service, more effectively delivered to the people who need it. So number one, what business are you really in? Number two, as you look at your value stream, at the chain of organizations and events from extraction of raw materials to refinement and manufacturing of product and distribution of product and recovery at end of use, as we look at a value stream in which value is being added at each step of the value stream, the question is, where does the value leak in your value stream? What is the scale of the leakage? How much value is lost? And we have found in our work with clients that scale is massive. It is staggering, and the economic opportunity from starting to map and capture those leaks is just huge. Number three, I would ask, what are you really here to do? What is your purpose in your work, in your life, in your community? How do your actions support and fulfill that purpose? How does that purpose support and animate and enrich the work that you do in your business and the purpose of your company?
Nike's vision is to integrate sustainability into all of our business, and in fact what we talk about is how we want to become a company that gives to the athletes product that can be closed loop. And what we mean by that is that ultimately we want to make sure that our product can be recyclable and renewable and can be reinvented and have a new life after you've finished with it. And really, I came to the environment through social justice. When I came to Nike, I was very focused on how do I improve workers' rights. And my epiphany was this. I remember walking around a factory, and in the factory, when the workers are doing the screen printing, they used to use chemical solvents on that screen printing and in the gluing of the shoes. And so they'd have to wear equipment that would cover their mask, and the workers didn't like it. And so we would always have loads of auditors monitoring to say, you must wear your masks, you must wear your masks. Well, I think the thing to think about from a sustainability perspective is everybody has a role to play. Now, at Nike, I say everybody in the Nike company has a role to play in making us more sustainable. But that goes to consumers as well. And all of us have an accountability to think about change behavior or sending signals. In Nike, what we do is we think about how we design our products and how we make our products. Every single designer is rewarded for the sustainability that they build into their products. I mean, it's really part of how they think about their work.
Now we need to purchase products that are made to be rethought, to be reimagined, and materials to be reused, not to go from bottle to bottle again, but from bottle to jacket, from jacket to shoes. That is you have to put real earmarks. When we could potentially see that as behavior all around, that's sustainability. Having a real earmark. 15 years from now, that's going to be industry standard.
Sharing is a really exciting place for the consumer economy because it actually provides, it's a different way into a solution because it provides, it's not a deficit, it provides a better way to get something. There's something incredible about handing an item that you're not using to a friend who needs it, or getting an item from a friend. And the environmental benefit of that is, I mean, it's not a little bit better or 5 or 6% better. There's no need to produce anything. There's no need to procure anything. For every, there's 71 pounds of waste upstream for every pound of finished product of a new item. And the ability to share something that isn't being used or make better use of it, it's a whole different model for how we avoid that supply chain. Not make it better, not make it less bad, but avoid it with the same benefit.
I think sustainability can become really complex as a concept and really difficult to understand, and what's good and what's bad, and we're discovering new science all the time. So I like to break it down into really two different things. One is, how do I make today better? And when I think about making today better, what I'm thinking about is, how do I make a shoe that uses less materials, that leaves less waste, that reduces the number of toxic solvents or chemicals in it, that ultimately has elements of it that can be recycled. That's about making today better. When I think about designing the future, which is really how do I innovate a completely new way of thinking about shoes, I think about how do I give to the consumer and to the athlete what I call a closed loop shoe. Something where you don't need to use water, you don't need to use fossil fuels. It's completely recyclable. So for example, you could go out and run in your shoe and you could come back when it's old and tired, and I would turn it into a new shoe. And perhaps what you and I would start talking about is the design of that new shoe. And I would start to sell you that as a service, and perhaps I'd even begin to lease you a shoe. Now that's a very far out vision of the future, but we are very steadily making our way there. And I think the key thing to remember is that for Nike, it's really all about materials. At the end of the day, everything we make, all of us, whether it's a t-shirt or a shoe or any other product, it all comes from materials. And materials all come from the earth, whether they're made with water, whether they're made from cotton and agriculture, whether they're made with fossil fuels. And when we make those materials, when we turn them into fabrics or we turn them into the things that you use in other products, we use a whole load of natural resources. And so what we have to do is, if we can focus on materials, we can make a huge impact on the world, and that's worth focusing on.
So I came up with the concept EcoCycle, and it's a play on the word Coke. It takes the Coke, C-O-K-E, flips it around, and makes it E-K-O-C for eco-cycle, eco-community, eco-concept, eco-center, eco-consciousness, eco-collaboration. And we take their waste, their byproducts, and make a new base cloth. And then we license that brand and that base cloth to other companies, like these Levi's. These are made out of 8 plastic Coke bottles. Glasses, shoes, Beats headphones. Puts the consumer in, I don't like that word, the partner. Because the person that's purchasing it is the one adding value because it was selected. They demanded it. So they're not a consumer, they are partners. So that's the concept for EcoCycle. It's 3 folds: the customer partner, the product, and how it's made, technology, and aspiration, the demand for things to be made out of sustainable materials to create a sustainable society.
I had this moment where it was my daughter's first soccer game, and I'm standing on the sidelines, and she just run out to play soccer, and she's wearing brand new shin guards, and I was standing with a dad that I recognized from my neighborhood, and he looked at me and said, gosh, it costs a fortune every year, with all the gear, and I want to make sure my daughter had the right gear. And he said, we've got 2 or 3 pair of shin guards right now in our basement. And some people would say, yeah, but that's complicated to be able to get that item, to know who has it. And I spent over a decade as an executive at Walmart. Complicated is the supply chain to produce the new shin guards, right? Complicated is the fact that when I click a button on Amazon, it gets to my house in 48 hours. from 500 miles away. Simple is me going next door to my neighbor and picking up the shin guards that he's done with in his garage. And so that was a moment for me where, it's not just shin guards or soccer, it's tents and kids' clothes and outdoor gear and kitchen items and adult clothing, and it's all the things in our lives and things that we can share with our friends. And the ability to connect easily with people that I'm friends with, or friends of those people, or people that I go to school with, it changes the whole experience. And it goes from, making a few extra dollars on something, which is fine and great, but we're finding it even more rewarding to be able to give something to someone you care about.
What's the biggest brand promise that you could possibly make at the intersection of business and sustainability? And once you've made that promise, what possibilities open up? What challenges open up? What demands on you are opened by that promise that if you fulfill it, can shift the game in your business, in your industry, and in the economic and ecological and social ecosystems that we share. Some people question whether there is profit or business value in brands becoming sustainable. In our experience, the value is enormous. There's the obvious level of sustainability as efficiency, reducing energy use, reducing waste, reducing materials purchases. These are costs to a business, and becoming more efficient can reduce the cost structure, therefore improve profit. So that's the basic level that many companies start with. But there's also sustainability as a driver of innovation, as a developer of better product that delivers better performance and value to customers, which lets you then grow market share and grow profitability. There's the impact of sustainability on risk. Companies that are getting ahead of concerns around climate change or regulatory shifts in not just in advanced economies like Europe and the United States, but even in countries like China. So sustainability becomes a way to anticipate forward risk and reduce the risk as part of the business operations. There's impact even on things like employees. Sustainability has a powerful impact on the recruitment and retention of employees, both very expensive factors for a company, and even more than their direct costs, have a great impact on the level of creativity and innovation and quality of a workforce. Ultimately, a brand is a collection of people working together hopefully toward a common purpose. And more, the best and the brightest are wanting to work for companies that are making serious moves on their sustainability commitments.
Are the greener brands making more money? And I think the answer is a clear yes. It doesn't always show up on the financial sheet right now, but there are reputational factors that are kind of gaining credence in this space. Consumers assume products are safe, but as they learn that there's ethyl methyl killia in a product, they don't want to use it. So the good brands are making the transitions, they are tweaking their messaging, they're getting independent validation that the claims are accurate, and they're winning kind of the long-term strategy. If you're looking to go green to get the instant hit, you're not going to see it. But if you're looking at kind of the longer-term trends over 3-5 years, you'll see the greener brands are going to dominate, the older brands are going to die. And here's where it gets real for me. I have 2 little girls at home, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. I need your help being a better dad. My job is to prepare them for the big wide world. I need it to be a better world. I need you to help me protect them. I need you guys to make better products. I need you to make sure those better products are winning in the market. I want to make sure that when I buy something, I know what you're telling me is true, that you've got proof for what you're doing. So please, please help me be a better father.
Well, it started in the 60s when we found out in the book Silent Spring that DDT was killing birds. Later on, information came about the freons, the danger to the atmosphere, carcinogenic substances like orthodichlorobenzene, caustic materials like caustic soda, strong acids like hydrochloric acid, chlorine like chlorine bleach, the ingredients that they should not be sold, other ingredients coming from petroleum that we know the carcinogens should be removed from the type of products that we make and our competition makes. We have the ability to make our products from coconut oil, corn oil, olive oil, plants like lavender, oranges, lemons. These are the sources of the materials that we use in our products. I don't consider myself of being fighting hard to make a living. It's relatively easy.
Yeah, so we think so. Again, this most desirable consumer, who we're calling the brand hugger, is a quarter of the population. They regularly pay more for brands they trust, and they shop more than anybody else. So of course there's money to be made. They're out there looking for products and looking for stories, and they'll pay more for it. So absolutely there's money to be made here.
It is profitable. It is good for the environment, it is good for the people, and it's absolutely beyond my understanding. While my competitors that have the majority of the market, they're still selling products that they're not good for people, they're not good for the environment, and absolutely will be losing the market share if they don't wake up and say, let's stop making these products that they're bad, and let's go to a more safer, greener products like F&E company. We're going to be taking the market from you. People get smart and they will switch to green products. That's the future.
Brands are critical in the sustainability challenge in two ways. One is that brands, or companies as we used to call them, are the mobilizers of the major economic forces on this planet. These are the organizations that make decisions and make purchases that set in motion a trail of impacts from resources through to use to end of use of products. So those economic decisions have profound impact on the living systems of the planet. And some brands sort of take the convenient way out of saying we're just responding to what the market needs, but in fact one of the things that brands do is generate markets and generate market response and orient people to what they might want to buy or should buy or could buy. The other thing about brands is that, what is a brand? A brand is a promise. A brand is an identity, but it's also a commitment to a customer, to a marketplace, to represent a certain kind of value, to deliver certain kinds of products of certain quality and certain reliability. And it's literally like a promise, like I promise to meet you, I promise to love you for the rest of your life, I promise to be responsible to, as a fiduciary, to your financial resources. It's a very different way of thinking about a brand than a brand's slogan. Coke adds life is a slogan, a marketing slogan. FedEx saying absolutely, positively, overnight is a commitment. And it's a commitment that can only be fulfilled by thinking through an entire business system and creating an infrastructure that enabled FedEx to deliver on that promise. Brand seen in that way, brand as a promise, is a very powerful way into shifting the story that we're living in.
There continue to be challenges in being the most sustainable company or operating in the most sustainable fashion. One of those is continued pressures on the growth of the business. We have a user base of over 1 billion users. We provide over 100 billion searches a month. We provide over 4 billion hours of video every month. So our user base is growing and continues to want some of these services. The question is, how do we provide that in the most sustainable way? So continuing to push on energy efficiency. We operate some of the most efficient data centers in the world. They're use about half as much energy as typical data centers. We've been fanatics about that for well over a decade. We also think about procuring renewable energy for those operations. In many regions, it's difficult to procure affordable renewable electricity, but in some cases, we've been able to work hard and find solutions. So getting to our ultimate goal of 100% renewable powered operations is a long-term goal that is likely going to be difficult, but we're committed to find options and opportunities to do that around the world in different regions we operate. Google works across a number of different areas to help the world become more sustainable through our operations, and then things that can extend beyond just what Google does. That is in the form of procuring renewable energy for our operations. It's in the form of being much more efficient in our use of energy and electricity in our infrastructure. And it's even in making investments in projects that can generate a lot of renewable electricity, not for ourselves, but for the communities and the regions in which we operate. We've, across our operations, have done things like procured renewable energy directly for our data center use. We've procured over 260 megawatts of wind power for our data centers. Within the investment sphere, we've actually committed over $1 billion in capital to over 2 gigawatts of projects. That's that's an equivalent amount of power to the Hoover Dam. So it's a very large commitment into investing in renewables. And we think all these efforts are really geared towards getting us to a clean energy future, which we view as the future that we think is inevitable and then one that we want to get to. And so we think about what are ways that we can help accelerate that as one company, but hopefully highlight methods by which other companies can think about it as well. We're seeing fascinating, not just conversations, but initiatives by companies measuring the financial cost of natural capital, thinking about risk and resilience and how that relates to sustainability, really pushing the envelope in terms of how they think about the future of their business, even what business they really want to be in, and looking at that through the lens of climate change and energy and natural resource scarcity. There's a really fascinating conversation going on that's largely below the radar of most people. People often ask, why aren't companies talking about this? There are really three reasons you don't hear about this in general. First of all, most of what companies are doing amounts to doing less bad. So I can say that this product I have has 45% fewer toxics than it did a year ago, and that's a beautiful thing, but it still means we're beating our wife 55% of the time. Another reason is that most of what companies are doing don't have any part of the value proposition of what they sell. So 100 of General Motors' 145 assembly plants around the world have achieved zero waste, nothing going to landfill. And again, that's a remarkable achievement, but it has nothing to do with selling Chevys. And that's the third reason, is that the minute they started talking about this, they would probably get in more trouble than they started. People would say, how dare you talk about landfills when you're making internal combustion engines? So to a large extent, no green deed goes unpunished.
In my opinion, technology is one of the key components of creating change. Of course, there's policy change, there's procedures and practices changes, but at the heart of much of what we need to do is rooted in technology, in being able to provide different ways of manufacturing products, different design of products that can be used in different ways that encourage sustainability. I could say that in our realm, what we need to tackle is to create products that are for the consumers of today. We have been working on home energy management systems. Let's talk about that for a minute. We've been building home energy management systems in Japan for the last 2 decades. And the energy management goes beyond just controlling the temperature of your house and how much energy your air conditioner uses. It goes into what kind of materials are built into the house, if you can recycle those materials. It goes into how you design the lighting systems and the comfort systems that go into the house.
I grew up in northern Minnesota hunting and fishing, and I had a mother who developed multiple sclerosis at a young age, so I was in the kitchen and helping out with everything around the house at a very young age. And so I think dealing with the challenge of having a disease process in the family, and then later in life realizing, okay, we get one body and we have to take care of it. So it's an important part, I feel, and for me it was this conscious health decision that I decided, okay, I wanted to take my body and my health into on a different path. And later I've realized too the importance of the environment, and by eating lower on the food chain and by eating a plant-based diet, I've found that it's not only beneficial for me as an athlete, but it's also beneficial for the planet. It's beneficial for the very thing that I need as a runner, clean air and clean land. So it's been a great opportunity to get that message out to others. As a vegan runner, I don't think there's necessarily a disadvantage or advantage. It's more about like long-term health. And for me, on race day when I line up alongside an omnivore, I don't think I am necessarily better off than he or she, but where I think it's paid off for me has been the recovery and the consistency with my racing and my career. I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't started changing my diet and eating a plant-based diet and just eating better quality fuel. So for me, and I think for all people, we want to be able to run and be healthy longer. And for me, it's more of this long-term effect. And that's what I've noticed more with the diet, being able to bounce back from hard workouts and basically staying young, vibrant, and healthy.
So we are very focused on taking protein directly from plants and running them through a very simple process that combines heating, cooling, and pressure to realign those proteins so they mimic the fibrous structure of animal protein or meat. So yes, it is a big concern of mine, and certainly methane, is a very potent greenhouse gas emission, and so on a kind of personal basis, if you're looking to do anything to reduce your impact on the climate, it's more important what you put on your dinner plate than, for example, what car you drive. The greatest impact you can have in the next 10 years is to reduce the amount of animal protein you put on your plate. I do. It's a fascinating issue for me because if I were to take you to our facility, it's extremely clean. We could put a camera in the corner of our facility and webcast our production process. Try to do the same with Tyson, Purdue, Smithfield, or any other major meat company. We allow you to see how your food's made, where it comes from, and it's a very clean process. So when people say, well, that's strange, I wouldn't eat that, I just have trouble with that because I know you can tour a facility, look at it, see how it's made, and you cannot do the same with the animal protein that we eat here in the United States. So I think, as I said earlier, as a kid, for whatever reason, I had a lot of exposure to agricultural animals and to animals in general. Spent a lot of time in the country, when I read books like Charlotte's Web, I pulled for Wilbur, and I really still do today. For me, there's really no fundamental distinction between, let's say, a pig and a dog. There are some superficial differences, but none of them are adequate for making an ethical judgment in favor of one over the other. And so said, okay, well look, if I'm going to spend my time and my career in one direction where I want to impact both climate change and impact animal welfare, this is the best way that I can do it.
So we've been working in Asia for a number of decades. I had 3 very formative years when I was young, in my early 20s, when I lived in the Himalayas in the 70s. And I saw how fragile the environment was, and I saw the amount of change to society there, and it struck me as an incredibly precious place. The culture was very rich, profound spiritual tradition, and physically spectacular. We had careers in the financial world. Teresa was an international banker for 20 years. I was in finance and investment, and I built a forestry business in China, a sustainable forestry business. That gave me experience in working with communities. We sold that business in 2004, and we're working with subsistence farmers in China when we recognized there was a great opportunity to plant hazelnut trees, both for the environment, for society, but also to make money. Bhutan happened later on. There was an earthquake in China in 2008, and at the same time, really within a month, there was the first democratic election in Bhutan, and that signaled the opening of the political system so that we could go there with the first 100% foreign direct investment, and that's what we've created. Our company is based in Bhutan, and we're planting 10 million hazelnut trees together with many thousands of farmers. These farmers are in the mountains between 6,000 and 10,000 feet in elevation. These are farmers who live often in rural communities, villages, that have lots of migration, young people moving from the countryside to the city, trying to get jobs in hopes of getting some income. What we're doing is giving them a chance to earn money by growing these trees. We buy the nuts from them, and they're reforesting areas that have been deforested. They're sequestering carbon and improving the quality of the soil. So it's a whole system, social and environmental.
I think a unique feature of this venture is also that we're doing this together as husband and wife and CEO and CFO. Something we can build together, work on together, and it's a 24/7 business, but at least it's something that we can work as partners.
And it's, as Teresa said, a series of wows. And we've been achieving these different thresholds as we go. Of course, as investors and business people, when all of the trees are producing nuts and all of the farmers are making a lot of money and we're paying lots of taxes to the government, and we and our partners are also making good dividends, that will be marvelous. But actually, along the way is where we create the value. And this process of building the value and working with our team is really thrilling.
We know the way we are raising our protein, the way we're raising our food right now has, and I always use the analogy that we know in our lifetime we need to look for alternative source of energy. And more we are seeing electrical car, we're seeing hybrid car, we're seeing wind power, we're seeing, and that's in our lifetime, we're gonna run out of fossil fuel. In our lifetime also, we need to change our diet to include more plant-based protein for the sustainability of our planet and the environment in general. The big question is, what do you do? And especially I look at my lifestyle was changing, and so, you know, I had a sort of brain wave that tells me there has to be food that I would like to eat that is not available right now, and it was healthy, convenient food, that it was cholesterol free. And so the more I work at it, the more I realize, well, cholesterol comes from meat protein, and plant-based protein doesn't have any cholesterol. So I guess my second aha is I realized there was 50 million hot dogs consumed every day in North America, and I said, I used to eat hot dog and I miss eating hot dog, and so why not create a hot dog that is not only good for you, but that tastes good, and it's environmentally friendly and ethically friendly. We have sometimes I talk to different students in university, and they always ask me, and I said, if a company is not profitable, and I tell that to my staff, profit is that feeds your body. If a company is not profitable, you cannot sustain yourself for a long time. So you have to be profitable. You know, people always ask me about my company, why are you trying to copy meat? And you know, I always answer, well, we're not copying meat per se, as we are using the same vehicle that traditional protein has been using for many, many years. So we do scallopini, we do 7-grain tenders, we do burgers, and we use shape and form that our people are accustomed to. And I use the analogy also quite often that, you know, we still drive a car on a road, a traditional road, although the car has evolved over the last 50 years from a solid motor with 8 miles a gallon, solid chrome. Now we have hybrid motor, we have plexiglass, fiberglass, aluminum frame, electrical motor, but we're still using the same road, and in the same sense, that's what we do. We use the same road that people are accustomed to with Gardein. Is they know how to make stir fry, they know how to make hamburger, they know how to make sandwich. They just have to. So we are in a transitional food that I think is here to stay because it's a more sustainable. And I think that the 4 pillar we have for our company is really, it has to be nutritious, it has to be socially responsible, it has to be good for the environment, but really the last pillar is one of the most important one for us. It has to taste good. And I think that's where our company is all about. There's a certain belief that you have to be philanthropic in order to do the right thing, and I don't believe so. I think you can be in an organization or a company and make profit and make a healthy profit and still do the good thing.
Business is not disconnected from nature. Not everything is part of nature. The question is can human beings, you know, embrace all the other living things, or are we ultimately going to continue to exterminate other life on Earth, and that ultimately will not be in our interest. I don't know when, I don't know how, but you keep kind of killing off life and bringing in more and more human life, bad things happen. In a world in which everything is transparent with all our phones and all our devices, you know, if you're going to be naked, it's good to be buff. So we help businesses and business leaders understand what those changes are going to be, how they will impact their business, what they need to do to change and win in the current and coming environment, and then help them do it.
The biggest problem that buildings have is they produce over half the CO2 in their construction, in their embodied materials, and in their operation. And so when we can design a building sustainably, we're reducing that by quite a bit. And if we can think about how the materials are used in constructing it, we can reduce it even more. So those are really good things to help with the environment. The reason all buildings are not done in an environmental way right now is really probably just lack of knowledge. Well, the main materials that could be toxic would be things like glues and adhesives and finishes, the outgassing of materials, and in particular the furniture, which is something that we don't always get to control. So furniture, clothing, things like that all can contribute. We can design a really great green building, and if the people aren't thinking about what they're buying, it defeats the whole purpose. So it's really a holistic overview of what needs to be done. A great sustainable building to me is one that really takes advantage of what a site has to offer from a bioclimatic point of view, and what it can do with local materials, and how the local culture can influence it. So when you get those three things together, it can really make a very green building, meaning it's as passively designed as possible. That's what I like to do initially. So as much natural ventilation, daylighting, we can get passive solar involved, good shading of the building to lower the cooling loads. These are all really important, and to me, those are all free. You know, if we've got a building with 30 windows on it, if we locate them right, that's great, and if we can get the overhang correctly sized, that didn't cost any more to do. And so that's really getting the building off to a really good start, and then we can make it really high performance from there. You know, there is a big difference between commercial buildings and residential buildings, and I don't want to get too technical, but commercial buildings are load-dominated buildings. In other words, they have so much equipment inside that's a really key thing. It either produces a lot of excess heat in the summer, or we can take advantage of that heat in the winter in the right kind of climate. Residential is totally different. It's generally what we call skin-dominated. It's the outside of the building. And how we impact that outside is how efficiently the building can be set up to run. So that's with really good insulation, the correct type of glazing systems, and properly sized overhangs.
So if you think about in your mind, and you go back and think about how a house was built 30 years ago when you were a child, and you close your eyes and you think about the same thing now, really nothing has changed. There's been almost no innovation in home building. So our job as a business is to design a new way of building and to make it easy for our clients and fun for our clients to build homes that are green, that are well designed, that have all the products in them, and really curate that experience for the buyer and make it something that they can buy just like they buy any other major consumer good. I got into this line of work because I was inspired by the buyers of our houses. I wanted to build a company that had values that reflected my own values. The biggest role that I think business has in affecting environmental change is designing new processes so that you can actually have, for example, in our case, a house that's very green, that's delivered from the very beginning to the very end for a consumer in a way that's different than it historically has been. And what we do is we allow people to design them, put the houses on their land, all for free, and we then build the house in the factory, we permit it, we handle everything from the very beginning of the process through the very end. We ship the house, we install it, and then we finish it on site. And the houses are beautiful, they have lots of glass, they have really tall ceilings, 15, 16 foot high ceilings, and they're built of steel, so they're way safer for this climate challenged world. And they have much lower energy bills, better interior air quality, and are beautiful to live in.
The moment when I said enough is when I realized that California has been in severe drought for the past 4 years. Everywhere you look, you can see signs of the extreme dry conditions that have been ended to us. It was at this point I realized the impact we have on the environment. If I just adjust my way of living and doing business, then I could perhaps start being a helping factor, not the other way around. And really my youngest daughter was the one that helped me to see this. Companies and brands have a huge responsibility in preserving the earth resources because we are one of the biggest consumers of precious resources. There are many areas in which companies can partner with other companies on conservation projects, green power, recycling, waste management, renewable energy and pollution are just a few. To address these issues, our company uses recyclable, sustainable material, implemented techniques and methods to reduce energy and water consumption, promotes energy-efficient products a lot more. We test for harmful materials when necessary before remodeling begins, practicing smart, sustainable building practices, planting trees. If there is any profit in sustainable business, of course. It depends on your definition of profitability. In my opinion, it's always profitable to do the right thing. The most important thing is the means in which one acquires profit and the intent of such a profit.
These homes, they all have roofs, they have windows, they heat their homes, they're cooler homes, they all use electricity, they all have access to water. And the products that are found in these homes ultimately determine exactly how much energy these homes consume or water that these homes consume. And so the idea is that every year these homes a bunch of these products have to be replaced in communities across the United States every year. So if you're a homeowner and it's in the summertime and your air conditioning system goes, you have choices about what you want to do to replace that old air conditioning system that was fairly expensive to operate. And as homeowners, you have different options available to you. You can select the less efficient product that over time is going to consume far more energy and be far more expensive to homeowners, or you can select more efficient models that will be a little bit more expensive, but the program finances the 100% of the cost associated with that product, and it enables these homeowners to repay the investment over the period of time that they're going to be saving either energy or water on their property. And so the idea is that every year there's roughly somewhere between 15 to 20% of the 135 million homes that will make a decision about what products they're going to replace on their property that year. And we want to facilitate a solution that would enable millions of products to find their way into our existing housing stock that ultimately have a significant impact in saving homeowners money, reducing energy, reducing water consumption, and ultimately reducing emissions that are created because of the energy that these homes consume. They want the process to be simple, fast, and easy. And it's very easy for a homeowner to apply. There's no costs to apply, so the application is free. The amount of time it takes to apply and be notified that you're approved or not approved is typically less than 45 seconds. So a homeowner can either go online or they can call, and within, again, 30 to 45 seconds, they will know whether or not they're qualified to move forward with this form of financing for a variety of different products that they may be looking to put on their property. The money that goes into these communities goes to pay contractors who have families, and they turn around and spend money within those communities. And then we, Renovate America, like any other form of financing, we make money as it relates to the amount of what the property owner is paying and the cost of capital that we incur to bring this financing available to homeowners. You can visually see what contractor did what project, what's the first year savings that are going to be realized, what's the lifetime savings that will be realized. And this is information that we want to provide to every community in the United States so that they can see what role they can have within their community to make improvements that not only benefit each individual property owner, but to benefit the community as a whole. That $343 million investment is going to save homeowners roughly 2 terawatt hours over the life of those improvements, and that translates into a lower utility bill savings of about $500 million.
People need fuel everywhere, so we have to understand that we are dealing with must-have product. We are not dealing like the high-tech market with nice-to-have product. So you must have gasoline to your car, you must have electricity in your house. So we are competing a very tough market, very big market. and I believe that more and more technologies will reach degree parity if we are dealing with electricity, and will reach the competing of the average barrel of oil, let's say for the next few years, which will be around, I don't know, no one can expect what, but we would like to compete with $70 barrel per oil, dollar per barrel for the next few years, and this is our benchmark. We will sell our solar fields to utilities, to developers, and we are selling our gasoline the same to refineries, to blenders. So actually we don't deal with the end user itself, because it goes through the utilities. The influence from the consumers comes from the understanding that we should keep this world green for our kids, for our grandkids, for the next generations. We have to understand that a lot of our health depends on the emission, depends on the environment around you. So you can see today what's kind of living people have in Beijing, for example. During January, most of the people couldn't leave their house in Beijing through the emission and the smoke on the city. So we have to change this world, and part of your efforts can help us.
I personally got into the sustainable green world because of a concern about the effects of climate change that might have in a very systematic way on our planet and on our future. And as a technologist, I wanted to do something about that. We knew that the biggest energy source by far that is sustainable isn't oil, coal, or fracking, or any of those fossil energies, but in fact is the sun. More energy from the sun hits the earth in 1 hour than all the energy consumed on our planet in an entire year. But we can't store it. And so if we don't find a way to store that, we'll never make an energy system out of that resource. So we're developing technology that would address that problem, that would let us store sunlight in chemical fuel just the same way plants do, just much more efficiently, making a fuel that we can use as humans to give people energy whenever they need it, wherever they want it.
And we're staying here underneath the solar canopy that we're going to be introducing later this year to bring solar on a highly distributed basis to local businesses and to residences. And it's going to allow people to generate their own electricity from a fully sustainable source. And it's going to be wired for those who've suffered through storms recently, so that if the grid goes down, you'll still be able to get power from your solar canopy. So we think it solves two substantial issues and is a vast improvement on other things going on in the renewable energy market right now. Well, to us, the great thing about solar, unlike most power generation technologies which benefit from economies of scale, solar actually scales down and can be applied at the community level and even at the individual home level. And that's what we have here, is that you can put solar power on your house. You can generate electricity with zero marginal cost, since the sun's rays are free. It's demonstrated that putting solar at your house increases the property value of your home. And also there are these ancillary benefits. One is, of course, shade or shelter from the elements, which we would have with the solar canopy, depending on where you are. And the other, as I mentioned earlier, is the idea that now we've basically wired this solar canopy so that if the grid goes down, you'll still be able to generate electricity during the day, and depending on how many batteries attached to it, into the night. Generally, as a business, no matter how big or powerful your corporation might be, you're better off if you ride societal trends than try and fight against them. So you can either ride the wave or be swamped by the wave, and we choose to ride the wave.
The first time human beings have created something that can create something that's tapped into the library of human experiences. We should all be a little concerned about that. to the point where we need to dive deep into our spirituality and try to connect to this thing that we've been stripped from, and that's this planet. We're not in tune to it. A new kind of spirituality that mines this new intelligence that is artificial. Now it's the first time in a long time. Like, let's take, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but in 1913, bikes were improved, the railroad, we invented, the Industrial Revolution, here came the train, steam, but a train didn't make a train. A bike didn't make a bike. Now, a computer will make a computer. A robot will make a robot.
Linearly, A, B, C, invent. It just happened. As I said, I don't know. What I do know about invention is it's not a linear process. A, B, C, D, W. I know how to get from A to B and B to C and C to D. I don't know. A real invention leaps from something we know to something completely different. And I don't, even after you do it, thinking back, I don't know how you got there typically. He also said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination, I think, is the most uniquely human characteristic I can think of. You wake up in the morning, I know how to do that. What happened overnight? It wasn't new knowledge, it was imagination. It was a dream. I'm pretty lucky. I've seen a bunch of my dreams come true, but I've got a few more that I'm really, really hoping will come true. Water for the developing world, electricity for a few billion people. My first program to inspire kids, right now it's in 69 countries and in 29,000 schools. I'd like to see it in every country in the world, and I'd like to see it available to every kid on the planet. So big companies aren't willing to invest in giving those core technologies to these people, but I see that as fundamentally flawed logic. If people had water and if people had electricity, they'd probably have the capacity to come out of poverty and become good customers and good partners. So if water and power are really productivity tools, the question can't be, if it's a productivity tool, how can you afford it? If it's a productivity tool, the question has to be, without it, how can you possibly compete? So let's get these basic human needs, water, power, communication, to a few billion people, and they'll become partners and customers, and the world will do better. So I've been working on those projects for well over a decade, and now I have some pretty big partners helping me turn that dream into reality. I've now got a partner, Coca-Cola, helping me put my water machines just this year in 15 developing countries. I've got another new partner for my other non-day job dream, my electric generation. That's NRG, helping us develop prototypes, and we'll probably put a few of them out in developing world villages this year.
The really fascinating question to ask here is, if we were going to redesign civilization from scratch today, and not assume that any of the ways that we have done things so far are necessarily the best ways to continue to proceed. Maybe they are, but we're really going to do scientific analysis on all of that. We're not going to assume that cars are the best means for transportation, which is retrofitting a very, very old system. We're not going to assume nuclear families or individual homes are the best way of housing people or having human units together. We really want to look at all of the different possibilities in light of all of the quality of life metrics at the individual, at the family, at the societal, and at the ecosystem levels. And we really ask, with the best of the technology that we have available today, how would we design education? How would we design transportation? How would we design housing and governance and economics from scratch that is not based on retrofitting Stone Age or Industrial Age ideas, but based on the very best of what's scientifically and technologically and humanistically known and possible today? What would that design look like? And as we keep coming out with new technologies and understandings, we get to continue adding to this blueprint of the best of what's viably possible. And when we have a blueprint of the best of what's possible with the most comprehensive set of metrics and considerations, and that's continuously evolving, and we have a continuously evolving data point on all of our global needs and resources now, then we can reverse engineer how to get where we want to go from where we're at, while simultaneously addressing all of our current needs and making sure that we address critical issues within needed timelines. And when we look at all of that together, so we have the future of global governance is how we collectively do decision making, and the future of global economics is how we allocate global resources to all areas of need in a scientifically optimized process that comes together to be kind of a new planetary operating system for how our species consciously self-evolves and self-navigates. But really what economics is about is how we allocate resources. And the first thing that has to change is the value system of what we're trying to optimize. Right now, the value system is competitive advantage. How do I maximize my advantage over them? And again, this is an inherently violent value system based on very, very old understanding of the world, based on Malthus' pre-understanding of recycling and deep understanding of symbiosis and how technology can create greater efficiency for everybody. And so the new value equation has to be, how do we maximize systemic advantage for everybody simultaneously? And that requires a mimetic evolution, a consciousness evolution, and then a corresponding infrastructural evolution. And what we'll eventually see is where all of the world's resources are considered the common heritage of all of the world's people, all the world's creatures. And what we look at is how do we collectively, with a shared collective value system that cares about the well-being of all of it, understanding that our well-being and the well-being of the whole are fundamentally interconnected, and what's best for the individual and the whole are the same thing. When that is the collective understanding, then what we work to do is to scientifically optimize how resources are allocated to all individual projects in ways that maximize evolution and quality of life for all.
You don't fuse business with spirituality. Spirituality leads business and how it's practiced. Like spirituality is your energy, and the planet has energy. But right now we conduct business in a way that undermines and ignores not only my energy, but also the energy that I'm living on.
So the question is, what is nature? The best thing I can say is I think nature is a gift. It's a blessing that we've been given, and I do think we have a personal responsibility to care for it so that everyone gets to enjoy it. I mean, just look behind me. It's gorgeous. You know, no matter where you live in this world, there is something beautiful about it that has been gifted to us, and it's our job to be its stewards. And you're hearing it right behind me.
No, this thing's living. This thing that we're living on is living, and it has energy just like we do. It has a consciousness just like we do, and it's bigger than us. Its technology is called nature, and it has brothers and sisters too. It has a mother. It has and it probably understands particles and gravity and gamma rays and electromagnetic frequencies in a way that we probably are just diving in now. It creates like we create, but it creates on a larger scale. So, and its business is beyond what we consider business.
Nature is all that is. Nature is the living systems of the planet that sustain everything that we do and everything that we value. But nature is the sum total of the universe. It's all of the cosmic forces, the physics and the chemistry and the biology. Everything that gives rise to all of our experience and all of our bounty and all that we care about. The trick about the question about nature is that often people think about nature as something other than us. There's humans and there's nature, and that's not what it is. We are all that. We are part of nature, nature's a part of us. We are utterly interdependent. And so asking the question of what is nature is a bit of a dangerous question. There's a trap in there. But there's also an opportunity to engage in this, 3.8 billion year evolutionary process of life creating the conditions for life on this planet. And that evolutionary roadmap provides the roadmap for business and for sustainable business in the 21st century.
Earth is the most beautiful home you could imagine. This living planet, all of the magnificence. Life is incredibly resilient. So in my darkest moments when I think we're not going to make it, the world has hit 400 parts per million concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. This was the level we said we could not go beyond. Well, we're beyond it. This is humanity's final exam. We will get it right. We will realize that there is a business case for climate protection, or we won't. If we don't, as George Carlin says, save the earth will be fine. It'll shake us off like a bad case of fleas. And life will go on. But we won't. And to me, that would be sad. I think this human experiment is worth preserving. So we're not talking about save the earth, we're talking about save humans. Save all of the richness of humanity, all of the great art, the great music, the great literature, our history. It is in our hands. What we do in this generation will determine if life as we know it goes on. I hope we make the right decisions.
Well, nature is an area that's undisturbed by man, and that's getting to be trickier and trickier to find. So, you know, what we can do is we can design with nature in mind, and we can be sympathetic to it. But as soon as we start marching our way in there, we're altering it.
Nature is life. Nature is beauty. Nature is everything that is good in this world.
Is everything that is created, is the outside, is the environment. It's nature in general, the nature of things, you know. We are part of nature. The world is part of nature. I think we are sort of living in an unnatural world the way we are right now. But going back to your root, going back to outdoor, I think for me is going back to nature.
Nature means the way things are. For the nature of a thing to be this way means it is the way that that thing is, which is all of the laws that are affecting and inter-affecting together the governance of that thing create a certain set of patterns of movement, of propensities or proclivities, which is what we call the nature of the thing. And nature as a whole is what is the synergistic sum that is more than the whole that's more than the sum of its parts of all of the laws of nature, of all the laws of the universe interacting. Well, what we get is an evolutionary impulse to the cosmos that moves us from subatomic to atomic, from atomic to molecular to complex molecules, to cells, to organisms, to progressively more complex organisms. There is a directionality to change in universe, a directionality to how interactions occur that as they continue to get more complex and more orderly, and as they get more complex and more orderly, new emergent properties come about.
We're like on this, we're on this like rock orbiting the sun, and it's all the life. It's what makes the planet work. It's us. It's the interaction between human beings. It's the interaction between the environment. It's the interaction between the products that we make. It's all connected, man, and if any one piece isn't working, the whole thing falls apart. So we gotta have the better products, we can have the better life. Not just for me, but for all of it.
And so we need to learn how that we can exist with nature. And if we don't, then again, nature will find a way to exclude us. We can't exist without it. We can't get access to water without it. We can't get access to energy without nature. And quite frankly, it's not on the radar as much as it should be on the radar. And at the end of the day, we want to create solutions that would minimize the amount of resources that we need to live.
Nature is our partner. We need to work with our partner in a sense that planting trees, planting plants and so on is good for nature because it balances the carbon dioxide against the oxygen content that we need to live. Nature gives us beauty, gives you safety, gives you work, and gives you nutrition, including the products you need to make your life more pleasant and enjoyable. So nature to me is our best partner, and the ability to keep that nature healthy and productive is where our future lies at.
coexist.